Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Manor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Manor. You know, there's a hidden ticking time bomb lurking in many estate plans. Unfortunately, without the right experience, you may not even realize there's an issue until it's too late. On today's webinar, attorney Bob Manor will explore these dangerous red flags and how you can avoid them. Before I pass the mic to Bob, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, even though Bob is an attorney, today's webinar will not give specific legal advice. If you do have a question about your unique situation, please contact us after the webinar. Next, if you have a general question during today's presentation, please use the question box. We will save time to review questions during the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the presentation. Also remember that today's presentation will be recorded and the replay will be sent to you tomorrow, so you can share it with family, friends, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. Now, why should you listen to what the folks of Manor Law Group have to say? First, note that we're nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Manor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. Bob is also a leader among elder law attorneys in Michigan. He is currently chair-elect of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. And lastly, my favorite personal reason, Manor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome attorney Bob Manor.
Hi, folks. We're going to get right into it. And I really like this topic because it really does go into a lot about the point of why we really need to be spending a little bit of time and maybe even just a little bit of money preparing these things. So these are the three top reasons that I could think of why we need to think through these more than just filling in the blanks on a form. And I think a lot of people look at their will or their trust as more of filling in the blank, and that it's the document that matters, and that's really not the case. And so I'm going to go through these ticking time bombs, and we're going to talk about how to solve those because they're really important. And honestly, these are the things that happen to most people and causes their families lots of grief, causing themselves lots of problems. All right, so let's start off with the first one here. And the first ticking time bomb is only planning for dying and not planning for living. I do a lot of classes that I teach, and I'll often say in the class, much estate planning is to talk about what happens when you die. That's traditionally what we think about when we think about our will or thinking about doing a trust, saying, hey, I want to avoid probate, so I'm doing a trust. We're just thinking about what happens when we die. I think is just as important, if not more important, is what happens before that. What happens if you don't die is the way I often will say that. And what I mean by that is there's going to be, for most of us, a stage in life where we need some help from others. We need some other folks to be involved in our lives, that we're relying on others for help. And that might be, you know, there is that rare person who lives a long, solid life and never really has any serious illness and just kind of dies peacefully in their sleep at age 100, but that is extremely rare these days. So really kind of there's three possibilities for the future. One is that you die young. Well, we don't want that to happen. One is that you're one of those rare lucky people that lives a long, full life and dies peacefully in their sleep without ever having an illness or being dependent on anybody else in the last stage of their life. And then there's what happens with most of us. And for most of us, there is a stage in life where we're going to be somewhat dependent or maybe completely dependent on someone else. Hopefully our children, hopefully our spouse, you know, somebody that we care and love about, somebody that we picked to be in charge of it, and not for somebody appointed by a court. There's all kinds of terrible stories. There's that movie out. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie recently. I Care a Lot, I think is the name of the movie. Now it's a big drama Hollywood movie type thing, so it's not completely realistic, but it's based on some terrible things that have happened when a court appoints somebody to be in charge of mom or dad instead of mom and dad deciding who they want help from. So the issue here is making sure that we have plans in place for that stage in life. You know, many of us plan for different stages in our life. We plan for that stage in life when we get out of school, when we go, are we going to get a job? Are we going to go to college? We plan for getting married. You know, sometimes people plan for a year to, you know, put the wedding together. A lot of people plan for having kids. We definitely plan for retirement. You know, I hear people saying, oh, I'm thinking about retiring in 10 years. So I got to get my ducks in a row. I got to get my affairs in order so that I know that I'm, you know, set for retirement. So many people kind of plan ahead for retirement. And then somehow we imagine there's not going to be, everything's going to be, you know, great and fun. And we're going to be walking on the beach throughout all of our retirement. Seems like that's always what they show on TV, right? When they show these commercials for retirement, it's always, you know, these older, very healthy folks walking on the beach, or, you know, saying that they decide to buy a vineyard. Apparently everybody buys vineyards in their retirement. So, but then there's the real life, right? That's the TV version, and there's the real life. And for most of us, there's going to be sort of that worry time. And the worry time is either ourselves or our spouse or our parent is going through a period of time where they need assistance. Now, it could be they just need physical assistance. Their mind is perfectly fine and they just need physical assistance. They're falling, they're having a hard time getting around. Maybe they have a little bit of memory issues, but it's not a big deal. For many folks, it's going to be a memory issue. It's going to be dementia. It's going to be Alzheimer's. It's going to be one other different form of dementia where we need help making decisions, okay? And so the problem with that is most estate planning, most wills and trusts and associated documents don't really plan for that. And so this is a big ticking time bomb, because it's not just about making sure that we have the people, the right people in place for this to be able to assist us. And then we update that from time to time because things change over time. But the big issue is going to be, how are we going to pay for that? So if you've never experienced this, you might have, you know, you might not realize. A lot of people say, oh, I'm just going to stay in my home and I'll be fine and everything will be fine. Well, a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times staying in your home is only an option if we have caregivers there. And is the family going to be able to quit their jobs and care for you? And the answer is maybe, but then can we compensate them? Well, then we're paying for care. Or do we need to hire caregivers? Or do we need to look at independent living or assisted living or nursing home? And then the question is, well, how are we going to pay for all of that? And so what hardly anybody realizes is that your legal documents are a part of that. You know, I'm not talking about buying insurance, okay? So that's something you can consider, but I don't sell insurance, I don't sell long-term care insurance or things like that. What I'm talking about is your legal plan has to have a plan for saying, well, what if I have dementia? How am I going to pay for that? We have things that we put in our legal documents that we call extraordinary powers. Extraordinary powers. Why are they extraordinary? Well, the first reason they're extraordinary is because you have to have an extraordinary level of trust in the people that you appoint. If you have nobody in your life that you trust that much, you know, I always say one of the topics that or phrases that I always say is, we plan for people that have, you know, we can only plan for people that have people they love and trust, right? It's hard for me to plan for you if you don't have anybody that you love and trust. So if you have somebody that you love and trust, that's, you know, that's the type of person I can help, because I'm going to try to keep you out of the court system. I'm going to try to keep the family matters in the family, keep the government out of it, okay? And I can only do that if you've got people that you love and you trust. And so the extraordinary powers when it comes to this is an extra level of authority, an extra level of permissions that are not in most people's documents. And why aren't they? Because lawyers are afraid to give them this extra authority, because what if they're not trustworthy, you know? And so the idea is most lawyers draft their legal documents in a defensive standpoint, and they put limitations, or they just don't go far enough in the language to be able to address the issue of how might we qualify for veterans benefits? How might we qualify for Medicaid benefits, okay? So there's government programs that you've paid into your whole life, or that you've earned through yourself or your spouse's service in the military service. And you've either earned it through military service, or your spouse earned it through military service, or you've paid into these programs all your life, and they are available if you know how to use them right, and if you set up your estate planning properly. And almost nobody realizes that, because nobody thinks about that, because nobody wants to think about that stage in life where maybe we have dementia. We kind of imagine that might be somebody else. We imagine, well, I could see that happen to my sister. It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to my spouse. Well, guess what? Statistics say there's a pretty good chance that, you know, between you and your spouse and your parents, somebody's going to have these problems. And so we better have a plan for how we care for it. Or maybe it's not even dementia. Maybe it's a stroke. You know, what if we have a stroke and we lose our ability to communicate, or we lose our ability to handle our finances, or things like that? Or we just need somebody there physically helping us all day long. You know, 24-hour care is what they call it. And so how are we going to pay for 24-hour care, whether it's in our home or in a nursing home or assisted living? And their answers is that there's these veterans benefits and Medicaid benefits. But in order for us to plan for that, one of the things, and there's a number of things that we do to plan for that specifically, but one of the things is we make sure that if you have somebody that you completely love and trust, that or specifically trust, but you probably want to make sure you love them too, is that we can give them extra authority, extraordinary powers to be able to make sure that assets are situated properly to qualify for these programs, because all of these programs are going to have some asset requirements. So some folks at that point say, okay, well, wait a second. If they have these asset requirements, how can we qualify? If you've ever heard Medicaid and you've done some research, a lot of people say, oh, you can't have any assets and qualify for Medicaid. Well, that's just not true. There's lots of rules with regard to Medicaid. And so we know how to apply the rules, and we know how to structure your estate in such a way that's going to qualify for those rules. I compare what we do. We'll often hear about rich folks that don't pay taxes, right? Politicians that don't pay very much in taxes. And so the idea there is that they probably have lawyers and accountants that are helping them structure their assets in such a way to put them in a better position as it relates to taxes. That's what we do as it relates to making sure that you're going to have, or at least doing our best to come up with a plan that you're going to be able to access care options, that you're going to be able to hopefully stay in your home longer, that you're going to be able to not go broke if you go into a nursing home or your spouse goes into a nursing home. Most people have no idea that that's actually part of your will and your trust, and that's part of your estate plan. And most lawyers don't plan for it, to be honest with you. It's very few lawyers plan for this area. So that's my biggest ticking time bomb, is only planning for dying, but not planning for living, not planning for that stage in life where we might be dependent on others and we might need to be able to pay for care, which can be very, very expensive. And not wanting to go broke, not wanting to lose anything, not wanting to impoverish our spouse. I have so many, so terrible stories that, people come in and they're just in a terrible spot because they have all these care expenses for their spouse, and now they're going to be looking at poverty unless we help them. That's what we do. We help them in that situation. But until they find us, sometimes we hear some really awful stories about, people that worked hard all their lives, and now they're really hurting for money because of their spouse's medical expenses. Well, that's what we do. That's what we help people with. Okay. So that's the first ticking time bomb. What's the second ticking time bomb? Well, the second ticking time bomb is planning without predicting the future. I was trying to figure out different ways to say this, and there's the people that have the crystal balls or the other ways of predicting the future. I was trying to say, planning without trying to knowing what happened 10 years from now, knowing what happened 20 years from now, knowing what happened tomorrow with the whole coronavirus and pandemic and everything else. Nobody should be surprised about incredible changes that can occur. Sometimes it seems like it was overnight. We just saw reminders of that recently, and the idea that things change very dramatically. Well, we don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know. We definitely don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. And this is a really big issue, and so many people aren't planning for that. So how do you plan for that? And the answer is, honestly, this is going to sound self-serving, but you work with an attorney that has thought all of these things through and knows to ask the right questions to say, okay, we need to have a plan for just about any contingency, and we need to build in flexibility to be able to make decisions later when we have the right information. So what am I getting at here? So many people write their will or write their trust, especially when they try to go cheap and get LegalZoom, or they hire an attorney that doesn't really do this type of work, and they're just filling in the blanks. And the idea is you can't fill in the blanks because you don't know. There's so much you don't know that your legal documents are dependent. They're going to have the final say in all of this. Well, you don't know when you're going to die. A lot of people kind of write their will as if they're going to die tomorrow. Well, you're not. You're not going to die tomorrow. And so then, we don't know when you're going to die. It could be 20 years from now. It could be tomorrow. It could be 50 years from now. We don't know when you're going to die. What happened between now and then? We don't know how much money you're going to have. Okay, so how do we plan for money? Maybe you had more money. Maybe you had less. Maybe you're just going into retirement and you say, I don't really have that a lot. I got a secret for you that most people, financial advisors in particular, don't tell you this. Most people start accumulating money in retirement. Isn't that funny? We don't think of it that way, especially the baby boomer generation and the older generation before that. What I've noticed is, we have this in our heads that we're going to retire and then we're going to travel the world, and we're going to spend all our money. And I have clients that will tell me that all the time. Well, I just plan on spending all. And then I see them 10 years later and I say, well, how's that going? Because now I see you've doubled your worth. And it happens to so many people because, we've got our house paid for. We don't have as many expenses, the idea is a lot of times we have a lot more assets than we thought we were going to have. And that's the exact opposite of what financial advisors will tell you. And of course, you don't want to plan for that. You don't want to be silly about this and not, make sure that you're going to have enough for retirement. So I appreciate the financial advisor's point on this. And that's the correct point, is to say you better be better prepared instead of ill prepared. So they say, well, you got to make sure that you have your finances set up, particularly well for retirement. But in my experience, and I've been doing this for 25 years, that most people, when I see them at 65, they have a little bit, but they don't have, they're getting by, they're doing fine, they're going into retirement, they have the house mostly paid for, and they got a little bit of savings. But I see them at 75 and I say, oh my goodness, now you have lots of savings, you have this investment, you have this annuity, your IRA even grew, your 401k that you turned into an IRA grew, and we have a lot more assets, sometimes more diversity of assets. So, but that might not happen either. Maybe it is the opposite. Maybe you have nothing. Maybe you don't have, maybe, I hope this is not the case, but maybe you started giving your money away to your kids. And I really don't like that unless it's absolutely necessary. I always say, look, if your daughter's in jail and she needs bail money, I guess that's okay that you might help her out in that. But if you're just giving money away to give money away to try to hide it or save on taxes, guess what? You're not hiding it and you're not saving on any taxes. And so people do this thinking that they're doing the right thing, and it's absolutely not the right thing. And it almost always blows up in their face. And so giving money away in large sums, unless you're a multi-millionaire, actually doesn't provide any tax benefits. Unless you currently, under current law in Michigan, unless you have over $12 million to give away, you don't get any tax advantage by giving money away to the kids now, and instead of letting them inherit it at a later date. Now, if you want to give them money because you want to see them enjoy it and you have lots of extra money, that's something that you should talk to your lawyer about, talk to us about it, and make sure that we have a plan in place to make sure that we title it properly, structure it properly, all those types of things. But if too many people I see that don't have extra money and they're giving money away, and that's problematic. And so again, we have folks that do that, and we'll have, we can give you some advice about it and help you. Even if you're going to do it, even if you do it against our advice, we're going to help you structure that properly. We don't know what types of assets you have. So right now you may have most of your money in an IRA. Well, If you live to 95, you probably won't have most of your money in your IRA because they make you take some of it out over time, right? You have required minimum distribution starting at age 72. And so you may not have any IRAs at that time. Well, that's a big deal. You have a house, maybe you have a cottage. You may not have that cottage then. Maybe you have 3 houses by the time you die. We don't know what the nature of your assets are going to be. So we're trying to predict and we're trying to do these things. And sometimes people are doing very simplistic documents that aren't suitable for the changes in the life that are going to occur. So what we do is we try to make sure that we have planning in place and contingency in place for, well, what if it is a different type of asset? So what if instead of having IRAs, we have real estate in the future? What if we don't have any real estate? Making sure we have a plan for that. We don't know who died before you. We don't know who your survivors are going to be. And so, you know, this is a big one. A lot of people don't spend more than 10 seconds thinking about that. They just assume everybody alive today is going to be alive when they die. Or maybe, you know, maybe not their parents or things like that, but even that sometimes they do. And the idea here is we probably should start thinking through that because a lot of things could change with regard to that. We don't know what life situations your heirs, your family's going to be in. So what if one of your kids has dementia? You know, you live to 95, they might be 70. Well, we have lots of clients that are 70 that have severe dementia. What if they need 24-hour care? We still want to help them, and there's ways to help them, but if you just have it go directly to them, which is what most people's will and trust does, now that's not helping them, that's hurting them. That's going to make it harder for them to qualify for programs that are going to help them pay for their care. Now, we could set it up so that they still get it, and yet it's excluded from having to be counted towards veterans benefits or excluded from having to be counted towards nursing home costs and things like that, or home care. And so the idea is we don't know. So we try to plan with contingencies in there. What if one of your kids is subject to a lawsuit at the time? Well, we want to make sure, what if they're going through a divorce at the time? We really hope that's not the case, but all kinds of bad things could happen. What if people died in the wrong order? What if it's your grandkids? So now you left it to your kids and it's actually going to go to your grandkids, or maybe your great-grandkids. We don't even know that. It could go to your great-grandkids. Maybe it's not because it's not worded properly because we haven't thought it through that far. And so the idea is we really do have to, this is the value in working with a qualified, experienced lawyer that looks into all of this, because this is not just filling out a form. This is not just filling in the blanks. This is making sure that we've thought through all of these things and try to make sure that we have a plan for everything, and it's adaptable if things change and we change our minds, okay? But we're thinking through some of these issues that haven't occurred yet. I had a family that came in recently, and they had scheduled an appointment with me because they had said, well, we have changes, but they didn't tell my assistant what the changes were. They just said, we just want to talk to Bob. We're going through a difficult time in our family, and we just want to talk to Bob. And they said, okay, you know, we'll schedule you a time to talk to Bob. They came in, and what happened was their granddaughter had a terrible disease, and she was going to have all these medical expenses. And they said, well, we need to change our trust to make sure that, you know, she's going to have to qualify for Medicare. She's going to have to qualify for disability. She's going to have to qualify for Medicaid, maybe even. And we got to make sure that the stuff that we left her isn't going to cause problems for that. And so I sat down with them and I opened up their documents and I said, oh, well, we've already taken care of that. And they were shocked. They said, well, I don't understand. There's no way you could have known that our 16-year-old granddaughter would suffer from this terrible illness that's going to affect her for the rest of her life. And I said, no, but we try to think of everything. We try to plan for terrible things that happen. That's my job. My job is to be a pessimist, and I'm not. But I have to think like a pessimist. I think what's the worst things that could happen, and make sure we have a contingency in there for that. One of the big things that we've been planning for lately is making sure that we can adapt to changes in the tax laws. So there's a huge change in the tax law as of January 1st, 2020. There's likely going to be changes this year or next year, or at least in the next few years here, that are going to be substantial changes to how your family is going to get taxed. Maybe even how you're going to get taxed, but particularly how your family is going to get taxed after you die. And we need to be able to adapt to those changes. So many lawyers don't even think about taxes when they fill out a will. Okay, they're not even thinking about what taxes the kids are going to pay, because we're no longer talking about death taxes. We're talking about income taxes or capital gains taxes. We're talking about things that go beyond the obvious, okay? And so we've got to think those through, and we got to try to put your family and yourself in the best position you can be in. I was talking, we have a few different attorneys here. I was talking to one of the attorneys earlier today, and I said, what are other time bombs that you see in administering estate? She does most of this estate administration in our office. And she said, well, one of the things I see is the parents that have what she referred to as over planning. And the idea of over planning is, she said, you know, so many people will want to come in and they'll say, well, we've got 2 kids and we've got a house and a cottage. And so the house is going to go to Charlie and the cottage is going to go to Jesse. And that's such a bad idea, because we don't know that Johnny and, I don't remember the names I said, Johnny and Jesse or whoever it was, are going to want those houses. This could be 40 years from now. This could be 20 years from now. It could be tomorrow. You're putting handcuffs on your children. So, or they'll say, well, I'm going to make sure that this account goes to this person and this account goes to this person. There might not be money in that account. There might not be, you might have moved money around and made sure, you paid your bills out of that because you just had to repair the roof. There's just so many circumstances that if you try to do that kind of a planning where we say, well, this particular asset's going to go in this particular way, it's almost always going to go wrong. And so what she's saying is sometimes even in people's trust, they'll have this elaborate language about, well, this person is going to get this house and, and the whole family is going to keep the cottage. We can plan for that. We can do cottage trusts and plan for the cottage, but you got to work with us to say, okay, there's got to be an out. If one of the families doesn't want it, there has to be an out. I don't want to create this big family fight by forcing them, putting handcuffs on them to all of them are going to end up having to pay money to maintain this cottage, or they don't get their share because they're not using the cottage, or they're fighting about which person uses it on which weekend, or there's all these things, and there's ways to do it, but we really have to think that through very precisely. One of the things that comes up all the time is, do you want to burden your kids with your timeshare? So if you bought a vacation timeshare, what do you know about it? For anybody that bought a vacation timeshare, even if you bought it and you've already paid for it, what do you still have to pay every single year? Maintenance fees. And those can be pretty darn expensive. And so sometimes the kids, they don't want that timeshare. They're like, no, Dad, we're never going to use that. A camping timeshare or a vacation condo or whatever it is. They're saying, Mom and Dad, we're never going to use that. But if you set up your estate plan wrong, you're burdening with them they still will have to pay the maintenance fee. There's easy ways to avoid that, where we don't have to handcuff them and say, well, you're going to inherit this timeshare. They might not want it, okay? And when you specifically say, well, this person has to get this asset, well, today they might want it. Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. But 20 years from now, are they going to want it? They might be retired. They might be moved to Florida. They might be moved to Alaska. Who knows what the world's going to look like in 20 years, So the idea is, what she was saying is over planning. All right, my last one is not planning for all of your assets. This is extremely, extremely common. So even when people have a trust, a lot of times they say, well, I'm leaving my checking account out of the trust because I want my kids to have access to it. Well, guess what? That's what trusts are for. We can set up that they have access through the trust. That's a common part of the trust. Well, I want to make sure after I die that they don't lock the account. Well, then that's good reason to have the asset in the trust. And so not planning for all the assets. This is particularly true when somebody has a will. So they'll say, well, I'm only going to do a will. I don't need a trust. I don't need probate avoidance because I'm going to put a beneficiary designation on everything. Okay. Typically when you die, when somebody dies, we find out that one of the beneficiary designations didn't go through properly, didn't have the right people on it, or you listed your oldest child on there and they're supposed to divide it 3 ways, and that's going to cause them all kinds of tax problems. So the person that you trust the most, you're causing them problems because now they have to distribute it, but they're going to bear the burden of the tax. There's all types of things where we're just not planning for all of our assets. So even people that have a trust, they say, well, I've got this trust, it should be fine, right? Not necessarily. We got to make sure that all of your assets are going to go through the trust, are going to follow the terms of the trust. That's something that we do in our office, that we have a free annual meeting we do for all of our clients. And our free annual meeting that we do for all of our clients is just sort of this annual reminder to say, hey, did you get any new assets? Should they be in the trust? And then giving you instructions on how to make sure they're in the trust. You sold your house, you bought a condo. Is the condo going to go through the trust? Nope, not unless you do something about it. You switch banks. Is that new bank going to go through the trust? Nope, not unless you do something about it. So we've got this annual reminder. We call it our memory jogger, actually, is a big part of our annual reminder that says, you know, did you get any new assets? Did anybody die? We'll tell you about changes in the law that occurred that year. And it's just a free thing, a free service that we do for our clients. We don't sit one-on-one with you. We can't do that because we'd have to charge you for that. But we do have an educational event every year that we want all of our clients to watch and interact with us. There's an interactive part of it where you have to answer some questions. And the idea is to make sure that you stay up to date on things and that all of your assets are planned for. But so often, that's the biggest issue. Somebody dies and they thought they planned for everything, but they left out this bank account. They left out, they didn't, you know, get the new cottage in there. They didn't get the new condo in there. You know, there's different things that aren't addressed. And so those are my 3 biggest ticking time bombs. I could probably think of 20 more if you wanted to stay with me for another couple of hours. But that's what I have for today. So I'm going to have Savannah take over and see if we have any questions and give some instructions about how you can get more information from us, how you can get your questions answered, and how you can interview us to see if this is something that you want us to help you with. So Savannah, if you want to take over.
Sure thing. Thanks, Bob. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I know I learned something new, even though I work here. Every time I watch one of these webinars, I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. So thank you, Bob, for that. So as Bob mentioned, we do have an easy way for you to get started working with our team. Of course, you can check your email inbox within the next 10 minutes. I'll be sending you a follow-up email. You'll have our phone number there for you. And I've put that phone number in the chat. So you can call us. Our phone number is 810-694-9000. Go ahead and give us a call. We're here today until 5. Or if you're busy today, but you know you'd like to talk with us, I also put a link in the chat. You can click that link and it will take you to a calendar. You can schedule a day and time when our team can call you. And as Bob mentioned, it gives you a chance to interview our team. Make sure that we're the right law firm for you and your family. And we can also get some information about your situation, and we can make sure we're the right law firm for you and your family. So I do encourage you, even if you're not sure, just to give us a call, because there's no risk, there's no obligation. It's a free call, just information. So we're here again, 810-694-9000, or click the link in the chat. In about 10 minutes, you'll also get an email. I'll also be sending an email tomorrow that will have a replay of today's presentation, so you can rewatch or you can share with family or friends. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next week.